Club, and I'm glad to introduce you Mrs. Jaswinder Kaur, who's
Hello.
written a wonderful book called On the Textiles of Punjab, which had the influence of the British. So Mrs. Jaswinder Kaur has studied textiles at Delhi's Lady Irwin College in 1969, and she has been on the faculty of NIFT and has been giving lectures in Geneva also. Along with me is Mrs. Upinder Sekho, who is also my co-moderator, and she's a writer. A very warm welcome to her as well.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you.
And we'll go with the first question. The first question is, tell us about your journey from learning about textiles to teaching and further writing a book.
Well, my journey started in college, where I did study textiles. But then, you know how it is, somewhere along the line, I didn't take it up so seriously. But then over the years, I was always interested in textiles. And then I did a few projects on art. So the journey from teaching to writing started earlier. Actually, before teaching, I was working in the museums in Geneva, in the two museums, where I contributed towards catalog, which it was an exhibition. Both the museums had exhibition on Indian textiles. So I did research on both the textile, for both the museums, and I contributed towards their catalog. But what in the second museum, Museum Darid Istoa, what really triggered me was because I wrote an article on Indian influences on Western textiles. Because it's very well known in the textile world that Indian textiles reached the Western world in the 17th, 18th century, where they were widely used by the Europeans. And that inspired the European the textile industry to, in a way, imitate Indian textiles. So it was a combination of many things. And the journey from teaching to working in the museum to writing also, which I'd been doing off and on, was pretty smooth because everything is correlated. Even when you're teaching, you have to do a bit of research. And along with that, one writes and stuff like that.
So over to Upinder Sekho had some questions to ask you also.
So, Andy Jaswinder ji, I want to ask you, is this your first book?
Well, my first book was a little booklet called the Mauryan Art.
Okay.
Which was for children, and it was printed by National Museum.
Okay.
And National Museum in Delhi. And so it is still available in National Museum. But apart from that, I've been writing, as you know, been contributing to Textile, to Tribune very regularly. Then I wrote, when I was in Geneva, I contributed to museum catalog. So it wasn't like a solo book, but it was like I've researched on their collection, and I've written about them. So in that sense, I've been doing writing over the years.
So in your book, you have written from kebab streets of Kabul
Chicken
to
Street.
Chicken Street, sorry. So how does that link with your book?
Well, it isn't linkage in that sense, but I was supposed to write what triggered my interest, what re-triggered my interest in textiles, because, for some time, when one is raising a family, one loses one's own purpose and initiative. So when I visited Kabul, it's just the streets were so full of the Central Asian textiles, and they were carpets, and people were selling, and there were embroideries and other kind of clothes. So that really reignited my interest in textiles.
That's really interesting. And this was in which year, Ji?
In 1990s.
Okay, wonderful. And another thing I wanted to know was there was from waistcoats something called as waistcoats came up in baskets came up. So how did that influence grow? Would you like to talk something about it?
Okay. See, the vasket is really derived from waistcoat, as the name is familiar. And this was, if you might remember, I remember my Puaji, she used to wear a vasket. And it was really like, you can say, you can take a waistcoat from a gent's suit and transport it to the Indian clothing. So it is really derived from there, and it has many features which are similar to the men's waistcoat, like pockets, the deep U neck, plain back at the back, and even the method of tying, the system of tightening the fasteners were similar to what men's waistcoat has even today. And besides, the European style buttons had started coming into India in early 20th century. So even that is derived, which is used in the waistcoat, is derived from there. So mainly a direct transportation from men's clothing to women's clothing in India, in Punjab.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah. And Upinder ji wanted had something else to ask, I think.
Okay,
Hanji, Upinder.
Jaswinder ji, I wanted to ask you, you must be having these vintage attires from where you got this inspiration, like those collar wale shirts, or you explore them to write your articles?
Sorry, can you say that again?
You must be possessing those vintage attires of your grandmother or great grandmother, or you explore them to write articles?
Upenda, unfortunately, I don't have that many articles. I do have some, not in the attire, but in other embroideries and pulkari and all. But in the attire, I didn't have, but my friends had.
Okay.
And a lot of people whom I had approached, who they took out generously from their sanduks and petis and showed it to me. So as particular attire ones, I do not possess too many of them. I have a few, but not too many.
Okay. Same thing happened with me. I had few. Then my friends, their mothers, aunts, they started giving me, they said, this is, I know you will take care of them. One lady, one auntie, she gave me her soof wala kagra to me. Some, they brought their stuff, says, you fix it up, you get them fix it up. So I got good chance to explore them and click the pictures.
That always happens,
Yeah.
So Do you have a copy of your book along with you right now?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful, wonderful picture, and we can see the
Beautiful
uh,
cover.
British influence on it. Can you show it again, please? Nice.
Do you want me to flip through some pages?
Yeah.
थोड़ी description भी देंदे रहे हो.
Seems the book is heavy. Book is heavy.
Well, it's not that heavy.
Okay.
So do you want me to read from here? Or?
Hanji, we would love to hear a little bit from it.
I'll read the beginning, the starting, and the corresponding to that is this picture.
Okay. Wow.
This is a historic picture. In 1946, the first legislative assembly that was there in 46, which was before partition, because British, they had made an interim government in Punjab. So this is part of that when they first visited the Harmandir Sahib.
Okay.
So I'll read the caption of that. In 1946 Amritsar, some of the elected members of undivided Punjab's Legislative Assembly at the Golden Temple. They are seen wearing different types of garments, achkans, coats, worn with kurta pajama, and Western style suits worn with shirt and a tie.
Okay.
And I can read to you a little bit the first few sentences of the beginning of my book.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
My father's home in Jalandhar was an open house frequented by people from different strata of society. Having been part of freedom struggle and then the interim ministry of Punjab, he interacted with a vast cross-section of people, including politicians, bureaucrats, and the common folk of the constituency from where he fought elections. I was intrigued by a variety of clothes worn by the visitors to our house. Some of them wore kurta pajamas and pagris, at times with coats. Others were clad in achkans, while some from bureaucracy wore English-style clothes. I later discovered that this mixed style of dressing, which continues to some extent even today, evolved during the British period.
Okay. Yes.
And about the embroidery, there's a chapter on embroidery also, which was very much, looking at that chapter, I realized that yes, plenty of tea cozies from our grandmother's time, and the tablecloths and napkins, table napkins, all evolved from that era, which we, you know, um, which you enlightened us, which we never thought about it earlier. Could you tell us more about it, please?
See, now Western style embroideries came to Punjab maybe early 20th century. So for that, I'll have to give a little bit of history. So just very briefly, so when the British came to, or European powers came to India, they discovered that in India, people used to not use this so-called elevated furniture as it is being done today. People sat on the floor. There was a space in a house was used as a multi-purpose utility room where people ate, slept, or socialized all on the ground. But with westernization, a new concept of using elevated furniture came about. And that also came with Western style education and Western style education which influenced people towards using wearing Western clothes and using Western furniture. So when furniture came into the house, there were two things that happened. One was that the people who were sitting on the floor, the men folk, they started wearing trousers, or rather the other way around. They brought in only furniture into the home once they started wearing trousers, because it was more comfortable to sit on a chair with a trouser than on the ground floor. The second thing that happened was, with the furniture came the use of linen, the table linen. Because in 1866 or 1850s, there are many writers and gazetteers that mention that many European style articles were made in jails for the Europeans, because at that time Indians were not using such table linen like ticozis and tablecloth and mantle covers, etc. But as westernization grew, they started to use such articles. Now, with Western style articles came Western style. Hello, you there?
Yeah, we're listening. Actually, it's very interesting. The transition from with clothes and furniture, everything. So it's quite interesting, actually.
Thank you. So when there was a time when women from village folk to the city folks, they embroidered, they used Western style motifs and they embroidered their own. So actually most women embroidered them, and this embroidery was also taught in schools. And along with that, many magazines were available. Many magazines had these pull-out iron-on transfers. You know what iron-on transfers are?
I know, because my grandmother was both my grandmothers, maternal and paternal, they were very fond of embroidery and knitting. And this transfer, I would sit with her, and she taught me how to do the transfer. I still have some books with me.
So
That's very
great.
interesting. Yeah.
So then the transfers came in. These transfers which were developed by end of 19th century, they started appearing in magazines and books. But because we were a British, we were ruled by the British, whatever came to England pretty quickly came to India also.
Yeah.
So a lot of these were available in local shops, not so much in the villages, but in the cities. But then things caught on, when one embroidered, others looked at them, then they copied and they embroidered the motifs and the patterns and all that.
Especially with the Indian elite, this became as a something coveted, treasured embroidery.
Exactly. But then this was not only with the elite. There are also people in the villages also embroidered these, because you see what happened. I have in my book narrated two with a similar design, but they were the one is done by a lady in Hoshiarpur and one by an aristocratic lady in Simla, and they both have the similar design.
Oh.
So I want to mention another thing, that that in my book there's now embroidery. The chapter is embroidery and handwork. Also includes crochet and knitting, which also came with the British. Before the British Raj, there was no knitting as such done in India.
Right.
They came and they started, it was taught in school, and knitting was initially called Jurab Bunna, because the first thing that women or girls started to knit were socks. crochet work was also taught in the schools. And this was there about early 20th century. And just to mention another two images which I have used of crochet work, there's one from 1920s in a place called Arnoli, and another one in 1920s in Slovenia in Europe. Both these images have similar roses and patterns, and both are crochet work done by two ladies in two different continents of the world with similar designs.
Oh.
Thank you, Upinderji. You.
So I wanted to ask you, Jaswinderji, then from where did you get this inspiration to write book?
From where I got the inspiration?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
You see, I have studied, as you know, studied textiles in college.
Okay.
And then after working on various projects, then I did serious work in the museums in Geneva, which I mentioned earlier. There, in one of the Musée d'Art d'Histoire, I wrote an article on one of the main articles of the catalog, which it said the Indian influences on Western textiles, how India influenced the textiles of Europe and America.
Okay. Okay.
So from which I've mentioned earlier that how printing industry went from India to Europe. So while I was doing that, there were my colleagues in the museum would often ask me a question about cross-cultural influences. Okay. And this was often discussed that how, because we were ruled by the Britishers for almost 200 years, that what was the impact of British Raj on Indian textiles. At that time, I did not have many answers, but that was in the 90s, that sort of triggered my curiosity. And then I took it as a long-term goal, and I sort of worked on it and I researched on it. And just to mention another thing, it took me 5 years to collect material. And since this was a virgin territory where no work had been done or it had been written about, there's not many artifacts in the museum either. So I was dependent on people. Upinder, you know, I came to you also.
Yeah, I remember now.
So I was dependent on people, and they very generously showed me their collection, and I depended on a lot of oral histories and very little museum collection.
So something else, Upinderji, you would like to ask?
So Jaswinderji, anybody else from your family has written books, or you are the trendsetter?
Well, you know, no one's written on textiles, so
Any
I'm
other
a
book?
trendsetter on that.
No, excluding textile. Any other book any family member has written?
Yeah, they've written political books, but
okay.
not on the material culture or art.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you are first one. Yeah.
Well, you can say that anyway.
I had heard about you from Upinderji, and she's been telling me since a long time to see you are doing a lot of research on this subject, and soon the book is going to come. So she's been really persistent. We must take her interview, and this is my first interview for Book Lovers Club, and I'm really honored to have you over here. And it's very interesting to listen to what you are saying, the transition and the way you researched. And, you know, we normally don't think about it that way, but it's a wonderful subject, I mean, to talk about. And
So
One question.
when I started it, I had no clue of how I'm going to do it and what I'm going to find. But as I went along, one thing led to another.
Oh, yeah. So can I ask you, so what next?
Another book?
Yeah.
Well, once you start writing, you don't stop. It becomes a habit, right?
Intoxicating.
So I mean, I feel lost the day I'm not doing serious study or researching or doing even non-serious writing. I feel lost. For
Yeah.
me, it's a passion or obsession or whatever you call it.
So I think we must take your blessings.
Sorry?
I also do same. Yesterday I didn't do any productive writing, so I was also a little upset. So today I sat and started writing. I said, no, I have to write.
Yes.
So what advice you want to give to young budding writers who has never attempted? So what advice you want to give to writers?
So there's one advice, there are a couple of advices I want to give. First is believe in yourself. Don't ever doubt that, oh, can I do it? Will I be able to do it? None of that. Just believe in yourself that you can do it. But then focus on one topic. Whatever book you're writing, a little, hodgepodge I've seen doesn't work. Because one of my husband's ex-bosses from his office, he used to, Mr. Daruwala, he's a very famous writer. So he used to always say, you focus on one thing. Because you focus on one thing and write about it. And so that's what I have done. Focused on Punjab textiles and written about it.
And one tip you gave me that was very effective. I used to ask from you that I never write anything regular. So I was always like, we'll do later on. Then you gave me one advice that fix your time, make timetable, sit and write. And since then I followed that pattern and now I keep writing.
Yes, because you have to have, I've seen what works for me. For different people, different things work. What works for me is that I get ready, and first thing I do is, not first. There was a time when I was completing the book, I used to be even sitting on the computer at 5 in the morning.
Okay.
But now, since I've done it, right after doing the family chores, I go and sit on the computer and don't socialize till about 12:30. Because then you get a good 2.5 hours of work.
Yeah. You're right. So Samita?
Hanji, I would like to ask, we have two people who have joined us on this chat. One is Simran Sandhu and another is Resham. So would they like to ask a question?
No, nothing as such, but it is wonderful listening to her. We are really honored, and I really enjoyed whatever she said. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hi, Samita.
Hi,
It's very
Simran.
early. Hi, Sat Shri Akal. Very nice to hear you, ma'am. Actually, it's very early for me. So I've just, I live in England, तो मैं बड़ी स्वक्ते हाले में वैसे थोड़ी देर पहला ही उठी हूँ. But I was listening to how the tips that you were giving about writing, and they are very useful because they say like everyone's got a book within us. And I think what you've just mentioned, like don't do anything till about 12, start writing, because that's, I think, the most productive time in the morning. So I'm going to follow your advice. And I
Thank you.
haven't actually read the book. I'll read it, and it's really wonderful to hear you speak. Very inspirational. Thank you
so
for
much.
helping
But
us.
it's going to be available on internationally very soon. Everything's delayed. As yet it is in India, but it will be available internationally very soon on Amazon.
Okay,
Basically,
so
it's a coffee table book, ji. It's a
Well,
coffee table.
that's a question because people who are doing serious writing don't like to call their book coffee table.
yes.
You can say Victorian, but yes, people do refer to it as coffee table book.
But there's a lot of material which, of course, means that a lot of research has been done. Even, 5 years is a long time to research on a book. A lot of effort, a lot of mehnat.
Well, yes, but I had, a lot of help. See, what is so amazing is that people you do not know, they opened their houses, their sandoor, petis, and they were so happy that I'm doing something on Punjab. And initially, when I started writing some of the people, I won't say friends, so when I said I'm writing a book on textiles on Punjab, they said, oh, what is there in Punjab? There's not much to write about. But, I was very persistent. And when I started, I did not know which direction I was going, because all these Vaskert and other things which I discovered were much later as I went along. So I didn't know what I was getting into, but that's the beauty of research. The more you read, the more you discover new things.
I remember seeing old pictures around, I think in 40s or mid 40s and 50s, about women wearing something like a frock, a shirt, basically, and puffed up sleeves with a salwar.
Yes.
So
yes, and also from the women's clothing, I just want to mention that traditionally, women did not change their dress drastically like it was done for men, because men, there's a visual change. Like they started wearing suits, though in Punjab, the pagdi really was indispensable. It still is to a large extent because of religious sentiments. But women, they were affected. They were westernized by different means. They added, like Upinder says, Western elements, and you're saying puffed sleeves, and they started using cosmetics, accessories. But what fascinates me the most is the sari. The sari was worn by upper classes in Punjab also. And there are some pictures from 1920s or early 20th century, which I have even used in my book. And the saris, changed. The early 19th century, it was people who are scholars who have written about sari in 1820s or 1866 have written it as a single garment. It was a single garment, and they did not at that time use blouse or petticoat. In some areas of India, they used cholis. In fact, there's a 1866 volume of J. Forbes Watson, who recorded the textiles and costumes of the people of Punjab, of India. And he writes that sari is a single garment where petticoat was used occasionally. So which means that around that time, the petticoat came to be used. And the blouse is derived straight from 1860s dress of European dresses, And the sari, they started using petticoats, which is derived also from European dresses of that time. But I want to just mention one fact, that the modern way of tying the sari was popularized by Rabindranath Tagore's brother was Satyendra Tagore, who was the first Indian civil servant of ICS in India. And his wife, Janinda Nandini, first started wearing or popularized, I won't say first started wearing, but she popularized this new form of wearing a sari in by 1866 or 1870.
Wow.
Wow.
This is so interesting.
Interesting. Samita,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a quick question. I've often, my grandmother, before partition, they all used to live in Lahore. And they were, I understand from all accounts, quite fashionable. So once my Buaji was telling me that they used to wear muslin, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਮਲਮਲ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ fine ਮਲਮਲ ਦੇ ਉਹ ਘੱਗਰੇ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਬੜੀ fine, very very fine ਮਲਮਲ ਦੇ ਘੱਗਰੇ, cotton ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, very full, and then ਉੱਤੇ ਲੰਬੀਆਂ ਕਮੀਜ਼ਾਂ. And I don't know, ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ photo ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਹੋਏਗੀ. I don't know what kind of did that. Have you come across that, ma'am?
Sorry, did that come in from the West?
No, I don't know. They used to live in Lahore. My dadi ji apparently used to wear malmal da kagra. बहुत ही fine malmal da kagra te naal lambi kameez. Knees tak lambi kameez.
That was a prevalent style. That was a prevalent style for a long time.
Okay.
This kagra was worn in Punjab for a very long time, and it changed only after partition. And this kagra, I'm not so sure whether it came from the West. I don't think so. I don't know.
No.
I don't think so.
I think fabric is from Taka.
Taka, yes, but malmal was also made, anywhere else.
Everywhere. Yeah. Okay.
So kagra, yeah, there are a lot of bolis and a lot of songs in folk songs about kagra.
And I believe I used to hear, like Simran is saying, that while going out, women used to wear kagra below, I mean, above the salwar and a shirt above the kagra, long shirt.
Yeah, exactly. But they also wore them for formal occasions, like for weddings.
Yes.
I've seen pictures that they were wearing. I suppose weddings also meant that they were going, there were other people attending the function, so they would wear a kagra and a long shirt.
Long shirt, Hanji.
The first picture that you showed, ma'am, about the Darbar Sahab jadon gaye, people wearing Nehru jackets and long achkans. Yes, of course, that is very much a British influence. So we've seen most pictures of our elderly wearing these kind of clothes, but now this has become more of a formal attire. Per pehla tha, I think they were more of work clothes and other things,
but no, even like there's another picture I can show you where they are wearing this a coat along with kurta and pajama, and that is for a wedding that they are wearing. So it was for formal attire also. I don't know if you can see this.
It can be seen, yes. Very interesting. Very interesting.
They're all wearing coats.
They're wearing on top of their kurtas.
Kurtas, yeah. And they have shirt-like collars, on top.
Yes.
Dolly भी लेके जा रहे हैं,
Dolly भी लेके जा रहे हैं. I remember my great-grandfather wearing a kurta underneath, but a long, not this kind of a coat, but that achkan kind of a thing on top of it when he would go for his work. I was one of the few lucky.
So achkan, since you mentioned, so was it this kind of, because this is also on the same page, because this gentleman This one, yeah.
Yes, something similar to that. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
I've also
Exactly.
seen.
there was
Or
a lot
most
of-
old family pictures have these.
Yes. So there was a tradition of mixing, you know, Western garments. See, all this is a process of Westernization. When Westernization happened, then people started using. In what was the initial thing? Initially, they started using coats, which they adapted it. They used it with their kurta pajama or Indian garments, and then then they started wearing overcoats over a pajama and all the pictures that you are describing also. But then when the more Westernization took place, then they started wearing Western suits. And then they started sitting on chairs and eating on the dining table and things like that.
How interesting. Haji Upinder ji, something else to ask?
I think it's okay now, Hannah. Yeah.
The interesting part is knitting. Knitting is, I mean, all the old designs of, the baby sets, the booties and everything. I guess even that's become a dying art now. Like Jaswinder ji was saying, it used to be taught in schools earlier. The embroidery and everything. I guess uh, we talk about the old art, even this new art form, which was introduced, is also dying out because I am fond of knitting, and whenever I go to buy wool, I only see, not that I'm very young, but I do see people 20 years older to me buying wool. Nobody around my age group also venturing out there. So it is sad, so some things which what you pleasure are dying out.
So knitting also has a history, which I've written in my book, that in England, there are many theories revolving around history, and one of the theories is that it came to Scotland first. There was a ship, a Spanish. It in mainland continent, it was prevalent first, and there was a ship, Spanish ship, which came to Scotland, and it got, the sailors it got destroyed. So the sailors came to Scotland. There are a group of islands called Fair Islands. So they came to those islands, and they taught knitting in those Fair Islands. So now the story goes that those kind of the knitting with multiple colors is still called Fair Isle patterns, and that was popularized by Prince Edward, who later the Prince of Wales, who became the King Edward when he later became the King Edward. So he was a fashion icon. So he popularized that kind of knitting, and then people like Chanel and other people, they took it up. Okay. And of course, in India, it came in India, just to mention another fact, that we in Punjab, we did not, people who could afford it did not wear knitted sweaters. They would always wear layers of cottons like case or different kinds of clothes, but sweaters were not popular. And they came popularized much later.
Basically, even the mission schools, they popularized this art.
Yes. Mission schools and missionaries. In fact, in Keylong, then Lahore and all, Keylong, there's a set of missionaries called Moravian. So they popularized knitting in a place called Poo. And those Keylong knitted, they still have Fair Isle patterns in their socks and all.
Yes, now that you mention, one realizes, of course, it comes from there. Yes.
Yes.
Very interesting discussing with you, Jaswinder ji. It was wonderful,
much.
and a lot of knowledge we received here. And we are looking forward for another book on the article you wrote for the Geneva Museum.
Absolutely.
And wonderful having you with us. And
Thank you.
Really,
Thank you.
really
Thank you so
enjoyed.
much for giving me this opportunity. Thank
thank you
you.
so much, ji. Thank you
Thank you
so much.
so much. Thank you, Ji.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.